Chapter 14. Late in the evening, Richard Sides sat alone on his couch, scrolling aimlessly through streaming services. The TV cast a pale glow across the room as titles flickered by. Old classics he loved hovered in the menu, movies he often played just for background noise. Familiar series scrolled past, shows that had once caught his interest, but not tonight. He was in a rut and he felt it closing in. The worst part was knowing it before it fully hit, a slow slide into that foul, heavy mood. The assignment gnawed at him, and so did everything riding on it. Eckhart didn't feel that same financial pressure. Sides wasn't starving either. He could coast for years if he cut back. But that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted one last decisive score. A payout big enough to put him beyond reach, far enough ahead that he'd never have to look back. And yet the thought made him guilty. Here he was, slouched on his couch with a remote in hand, alive and breathing on God's earth, something Alfonso Silva no longer was. The cursor on the screen moved from one genre to the next: horror, comedy, true crime. Each column offered stories, whole worlds waiting to be entered. He sat there, thinking about Alfonso. What kind of movies had he liked? Horror, maybe? Or old comedies? The family-friendly stuff from the 80s, thrillers, dramas, questions he'd never get to answer, irrelevant to the case, but somehow it felt important, like a piece of the man himself was missing. Sides closed one app and opened another. His thoughts drifted deeper. Why had Alfonso joined something so extreme? What had been so unbearable about his life that he needed escape? Alfonso had everything, or soon would. He wasn't just rich, he stood on an entirely different tier. He was set to inherit a financial empire, enough to shape the world however he pleased. He could have been a kingmaker, a name that opened doors in any corridor of power. And yet, there he was, wrapped up in something that chewed him up and spat him out. It was different. It was unfair. Why should someone so careless be given so much? What a waste. Sides sank deeper into the couch, thoughts spiraling. Where was he now, really? Heaven? Hell? Nowhere at all. If it were heaven, he wouldn't want to come back. Wealth would mean nothing. Matthew chapter 16 made that plain enough. Riches were worthless there. If it were hell, he'd trade everything, every cent, every comfort, to return as the lowest wretch alive, just to have a chance to do the right thing. But what use was wealth to the devil? That thought chilled him more than anything. Or maybe it was nowhere. Maybe death was only emptiness, and he'd miss out on all the joys he never seized. Sides slouched lower, letting the thoughts gnaw at him. With a sigh, he clicked off the television and shuffled into the kitchen. He filled a glass with ice, let the faucet run cold, and drank deeply. The water was crisp and clean, grounding him. He killed the lights and stumbled back through the dark toward his computer. He dropped into his chair with a posture so crooked it looked like a living sketch of the Fibonacci sequence. Rubbing his eyes, he powered on the monitor. The blue glow washed over him as he began to search. Keywords, names, anything tied to the Adherents. Headlines flooded the screen. Adherents of the Divine Winds, first-class abusers. Sides read aloud under his breath. The article detailed decades-old allegations, physical and sexual abuse in the California branch, operating since the late 1980s. Over 30 former members had come forward. Junior clergy, senior clergy. 2 cardinals convicted. 1 imprisoned for human trafficking. A life sentence in all but name. Another charged with racketeering and drug distribution after luring students into the cult with hallucinogens they never knew they were taking. Sides scrolled, eyes narrowing. He ran another quick search. The second cardinal was still locked away. He sat back for a moment, glass still in hand, the headlines blurring together. What the hell have we stepped into? A second headline caught his eye. New religious movement adheres to financial crimes. Sides clicked. The article detailed a disgraced cardinal in the Northeast who had funneled money from the organization's coffers into offshore accounts that couldn't be easily traced. Investigators only noticed after the government began auditing the Adherents' books in the wake of accusations that they'd abused their tax-exempt status. The piece explained how the cardinal struck a deal with the local district attorney, a lighter sentence in exchange for sparing the city an expensive trial. An amendment at the end noted that this same cardinal later exposed others involved in a multi-state corruption scheme that embezzled millions from unsuspecting philanthropists. Sides leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. Then he scrolled deeper. Entire forums, YouTube channels, and dedicated websites existed, spaces where former members poured out their stories. Most spoke of physical and psychological abuse. One recurring theme kept surfacing. The adherents withheld knowledge and advancement from junior clergy, a deliberate strategy to breed loyalty through hunger. Even the adherents' own official website admitted as much. It acknowledged the existence of a whole subculture of ex-members angry at how they'd been treated once inside. One site in particular made him stop breathing for a moment. It listed pictures, names, even known addresses of clergy members accused but never charged of sexual offenses. The page was hosted overseas, far beyond the adherents' legal reach. Sides stared at the glow of the screen, the cursor hovering as he scrolled further. He dug into their beliefs and history next. None of it surprised him. Their cosmology was a strange brew of Eastern and Western traditions, their theology slippery and imprecise, less concerned with coherent structure than with appearances. Comment threads seethed with debate. Online sleuths sparred with self-described adherents over what was intentional vagueness and what was genuine confusion. One thing, though, stood out clear as daylight. They rejected apocalyptic thinking, rejected sin, and even rejected the notion of forgiveness itself. Sides sat there in the silent glow of the monitor, cold water forgotten on the desk, and whispered to himself, "What are we really dealing with?" Instead, the adherents taught that human beings were trapped in an endless cycle of misery and corruption. When someone died, their soul did not move forward, but slipped into another body, anywhere in space and time. It wasn't true reincarnation because it wasn't linear. A man in some distant future could die and be reborn thousands of years in the past. What the adherents believed in was closer to an esoteric version of eternal recurrence. The major events and wounds of one life would echo in the next. If that same man from the future lost a loved one and lived under the shadow of that grief, then, in his rebirth, centuries earlier, he would suffer a similar loss that shaped his new life. Unless, of course, he broke the cycle by becoming an adherent. Time itself, they claimed, was not linear. Because of this, there had always been, and would always be, a way out of the cycle. In this age, they offered the most direct path. Still, their own texts admitted that knowledge alone was not enough. Even strict devotion didn't guarantee release. That, they said, was the work of the divine winds, the unseen forces guiding a soul's passage from one body or one time to another. The winds carried each soul toward the fate it deserved. Yet the faithful remained hopeful. Through discipline, ritual purity, and unwavering obedience, a soul might still earn freedom. Sides sat back, absorbing the screen's glow. His eyes flicked to the next page. Inquirers were urged to visit a local branch if possible. He clicked a small icon shaped like a map. A grid of pins appeared, branches scattered across North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. For those without access to a temple, the site encouraged emails to the nearest branch, remote video calls, and online seminars. There were free PDFs of holy texts, Vietnamese originals alongside English translations, annotated by cardinals from around the world. The official American site even hosted a library of videos, patient voices explaining doctrine verse by verse, concept by concept. Sides scrolled in silence, feeling the weight of what he was reading settle over him. What kind of machine have we gotten ourselves into? Sides found it peculiar that the adherents prioritized ritual participation over studying their holy scriptures. It felt counterintuitive. The online rituals were simple: stretching, breathing exercises, and repeated phrases meant to anchor wandering thoughts and sharpen self-awareness. According to the adherents, reining in chaotic thinking was more important than intellectual study. Through heightened awareness, a person could recognize their own wicked patterns and begin making deliberate changes. That, they claimed, would stop them from adding to their cosmic debt and start reducing it, lessening their misery in this life. Practiced with discipline, these rituals were said to accelerate release from the cycle. The adherents also stressed the need for spiritual teachers and genuine leadership through a clerical hierarchy. But clergy weren't held up as more holy than anyone else. Their role was to lead rituals correctly, manage resources, and oversee outreach programs aimed at supporting the vulnerable. Service, they taught, repaid a cleric's own cosmic debt and hastened their escape from the cycle. On the surface, it all seemed fine. Harmless, even. Sides didn't care what people believed, as long as it stayed benign. But page after page reminded him that things hadn't stayed benign. Former members and self-described whistleblowers filled forums with troubling stories. Some echoed the financial scandals and abuse cases Sides had already uncovered. Others were murkier, harder to verify. One name kept surfacing: Malcolm Rivera. It appeared everywhere, in threads, in comments, in videos. Where's Malcolm? 3 words that clung to the corners of official adherent channels like graffiti. And then another, darker refrain: WKMR. Who killed Malcolm Rivera? Sides stared at the acronym glowing on his screen, a cold weight settling in his gut. Sides dug deeper, but searches for Malcolm Rivera yielded little beyond basic biographical details: his early life, his conversion to the adherents, and his eventual death in Northern California. Even so, the outlines felt disturbingly familiar, details that mirrored Alfonso Silva's case. Malcolm had been born in Kansas to an upper-middle-class family. In college, he talked about law school and running for a House seat in one of Kansas's districts. He graduated from a university in San Francisco, then announced he would take a year off before applying to law school back home. His parents were stunned. Something about their normally measured, meticulous son felt off. That year off turned into 4. By 26, Malcolm had fallen under the adherents' sway. Within a year, he was preparing to join the clergy. In interviews, the Riveras admitted they had no idea what drew him into religion. They weren't atheists, but faith had never been central to their lives beyond holiday observances. For nearly 2 years, their contact with him dwindled to almost nothing. Malcolm sold nearly all of his possessions, including the car they still insured, without explanation. When they called about the insurance, he told them flatly that he no longer needed it. His father, alarmed, flew to San Francisco. For a week he searched, combing through old neighborhoods and asking questions, but the trail was cold. All he found were a few former classmates, people Malcolm had abruptly cut off after his conversion. Sides sat back in his chair, staring at the screen, the eerie parallels gnawing at him. Silva, Rivera, 2 men with bright futures drawn into the same shadowed current. How many more? 6 months later, the Riveras were notified of their son's death, bizarre circumstances officially labeled as a probable animal attack inside an apartment complex in Northern California. The apartment, owned by the local Adherents chapter, had once housed visiting clergy before becoming Malcolm's full-time residence. It was fully furnished and paid for by the organization. Each morning, he would walk the short 2 miles to the compound to perform his duties. Police speculated that Malcolm had accidentally left his door open and returned to find a large animal inside, an animal that fatally attacked him. One article mentioned that wildlife experts had been called in, but they found no evidence pointing to any species. A bear attack was considered the most likely explanation, though the apartment sat in the heart of an urban neighborhood where a bear sighting would have been front-page news. No photographs, no official autopsy. The local authorities sealed the file and refused to release further details. The Riveras pushed back, but from several states away, their efforts went nowhere. They called their son's death a murder, but they had no proof. Mr. Rivera took his fight to podcasts, hoping to spark wider interest. He appeared on several, his voice weary, his video grainy and poorly lit. The audiences were small. The story never broke through. Instead, a wave of online trolls briefly latched onto the mystery, flooding Adherent videos with the same bitter refrain. Where's Malcolm? And WKMR, who killed Malcolm Rivera? Sides leaned back from his monitor, jaw tight. He skimmed through the endless parade of true crime videos, automated voices reciting facts over stock images, faint tension music looping in the background. The podcasts weren't much better. Hosts with bright lighting and polished audio interviewing a grieving father through a glitchy split screen. It all blurred together, noise without traction, and yet the pattern was unmistakable. First Alfonso, now Malcolm. Sides felt his pulse quicken. How many others had vanished under the Adherents roof? Then, all of a sudden, there was another video, one that stopped Sides mid-scroll. The creator's name wasn't easy to pronounce, and his persona was odd. He came across as something between a true crime analyst and an esoteric horror enthusiast. His theories were wild, his claims bizarre, yet Sides couldn't look away. On screen, he looked like an exhausted caricature of a 90s gothic rock star. Age had thickened his face. A receding hairline was barely hidden beneath long black strands combed down beside each eye. He wore all black silver rings stacked on every finger, fingernails painted a chipped tar black. Heavy eyeliner framed his eyes, and jet black contact lenses gave the unnerving illusion that his irises were naturally voids. "Welcome, children," he intoned, voice low and theatrical, "to another episode of the strange and unusual." Sides raised an eyebrow as the screen cut to black. A logo flickered into view over generic horror movie music and faint, canned screams. Then the man returned, staring dead into the camera. 2 seconds of awkward silence dragged on before he spoke again. His face was weathered, his gaze empty. It was painfully obvious. This was a man on his 3rd or 4th reinvention, clawing for relevance, trying to appear edgy and youthful. It wasn't working. Sides smirked despite himself and kept watching, stifling a laugh at the melodrama. The video might have landed, if only the guy had bothered to edit it properly. Yet, despite the absurdity, Sides leaned forward, curiosity tightening his focus. The man had no new facts, just the same details recycled from other videos and online write-ups. His odd mannerisms and clumsy timing were the only reasons Sides kept watching. At one point, Sides noticed tiny pauses between segments, moments when the creator clearly scrolled through notes on a second device. He squinted at them, struggling to read in real time. Glasses would have helped, Sides thought, but glasses would have ruined the eerie persona he was trying to maintain. The usefulness of the video came entirely by accident. Each topic shift used a sliding logo transition, a quick sweep across the screen, accompanied by jagged violin ponticello and a woman's scream. Despite the amateur production, the creator had taken care to label each chapter with titles that matched milestones in Malcolm Rivera's life. And then, during one of these transitions, something flickered past, so quick Sides almost missed it. He sat up from his lazy slouch, eyes narrowing. His hand darted for the mouse. He scrolled back and replayed the moment. It was there again, just a blur. He rewound a second time, slowing playback to half speed, then a quarter. The logo drifted across the screen, and behind it, a warped, contorted humanoid figure emerged, frozen in an expression of torment. It didn't match the carved figure he and Eckhart had found in Alfonso Silva's home. Not exactly, but the resemblance in that twisted face, the agony etched into its features, was enough to make Sides lean closer, pulse quickening. Sides paused the video and pushed back from his chair. The figure. Where did I put it? He left his home office and moved down the hall to the bathroom. In the closet sat a small hamper he used for laundry. He dragged it out and began sifting through each garment, one by one. At first, he simply felt along the fabric, hoping to detect something solid in a pocket. Nothing. He turned out the pockets of jeans and slacks, piling them back in frustration. Still unsettled, he moved to his bedroom closet. Jackets hung in a neat row. As he thumbed through them, he found a forgotten $20 bill, smiling briefly before slipping it into his pocket. A few coins, some crumpled notes, a pen, nothing more. Back in the home office, he stared again at the grotesque image frozen on the monitor. The figure's twisted expression seemed to taunt him. He closed his eyes, trying to recall where he'd last seen the real carving. When he opened them, his gaze drifted to the door, specifically to the light jacket hanging behind it. He lifted it from the hook. Immediately, the weight felt wrong. The bottom swayed unnaturally. He squeezed along the fabric until his fingers found it, a hard lump nestled in the inner breast pocket. Cautiously, he reached in. Paper crinkled against his fingertips. He withdrew the wrapped object and tossed the jacket onto the back of his chair. Using the paper as a barrier, he studied the figure again, holding it up beside the image on screen. The parallels were undeniable, though not exact. Coincidence, he told himself. Has to be. But how remote a coincidence was it, really? Just then, the monitor clicked into standby. Darkness swallowed the image. Sides looked down at the carving, its frozen agony staring back at him. He poked it once with his finger. Nothing. He poked again, harder. The jab knocked it from his grip. It hit the floor with a dull clack. Irritated, he shoved the crumpled paper into his pocket without thinking and bent to retrieve the figure bare-handed. The moment his palm closed around it, a current surged up his arm. His chest tightened. The office dissolved in a flash of white, then pink mist coiled around him, thick and shimmering. Sides staggered, reaching out into nothing. The world was gone. He was somewhere else now. He was in the realm of the pink fog.